Today's society world power is also known as the world economic power, and we are not really sure who holds the key. There are a lot of factors involved and we have to decide what is the most important resource for the world's economy. Is it oil, energy, food, or even water? What about economic growth and technology? Americans are more likely to name China than the United States as the leading economic power in the world today. Actually, the United States and China are about tied as the world economic leaders in spite of the current economic troubles. United States. Americans now believe the United States will be the world's economic power in 20 years from now, with Japan and the European Union following closely behind. Unfortunately, we are totally dependent on natural resources. The essential needs for people everywhere are food, clean drinking water and housing. Sunlight and wind are the only natural resources are indeed essentially unlimited. The more industrial countries across the globe hold 25% of the world's inhabitants, but consume 75% of all energy, 85% of all wood products, and 72% of all steel produced. Americans consume the most of all, even more than people in other developed countries. Most Americans perceive the United States as the greatest producer of food, but China and India produce actually more, and we'll find so did Saudi Arabia is the world's largest exporter of oil and petroleum products. Even though the United States is not the largest producer of food or oil, and we are actually the largest consumer of thesis as well as natural resources, we are silent considered to be the world's economic power. World power, the rise and fall. The position of world power has changed hands many times throughout history, and there has always been a struggle for dominance since the beginning of the Roman Empire, which was said to have extended through 16 centuries. One country or person has always tried to rise up and become a significant world power. In the early 1800s, a military and political leader named Napoleon rose up and became to increasingly dominant influence. During his campaign, his actions helped shape European politics in the first part of the 19th century. The countries that he conquered and controlled were called the French Empire. His strategies and tactics are quietly being studied. In 1930, during the Great Depression in Germany, a man named Adolf Hitler began his rise to power. By 1938 he became absolute dictator of Germany. During this time Germany made the greatest expansions of industrial production and civil improvement. So in 1938, as a result of a summit which was referred to as the Munich Agreement, which Adolf Hitler named Time magazine's Man of the Year. In 1941, Hitler made a grave mistake. He declared war on the United States, which set him against a coalition of the world's largest empire, which was the British Empire, and the world's largest industrial nation and financial power, which was the United States, and the world's largest army at that time was the Soviet Union. The Germans did not think that there was much to worry about from the Americans. As a matter of fact, they had plans for ultimate invasion of the U.S. By the year 1945, Germany, which crushed by the combined forces of thesis superpowers, and finally surrendered, and Hitler committed suicide. Germany no longer dreams of being a world power. It cannot compare to industrialized countries like the United States and China today. World power, the United Nations. There was a great idea in 1945 to unite the whole world in decision-making and what it called the United Nations. The United Nations, which established in the aftermath of a devastating, was to help stabilize international relations and give peace a more secure foundation. Learning from past mistakes, it was thought best not to have one nation as a world power. The success of United Nations international relations depends on a strong joint venture between the world body and member states. With a large percent of the world's people lacking sufficient social protection and global inequalities growing, the top United Nations officials called for a new era of social justice. Indeed offers essential services, decently paid jobs, and safeguards for the poor and defenseless. Since the end of the Cold War, the United Nations have become increasingly involved in providing humanitarian assistance and promoting improvements in the health of the world's peoples. The United Nations operates under the principle that promoting economic and social development will bring about lasting peace. Although this was a great idea, it is very difficult to get the world to agree on most issues. By the end of the 1970s the United Nations had lost some of its prestige. It did clear what the two superpowers, the United States and Russia, would follow the foreign policy that they wanted to regardless of what the United Nations wanted. Within years of its birth the United Nations stands at a crossroads. The idea of having the whole world involved in global decision-making now seems divided between the rich and poor nations, which leaves the concept of all the nations working together for one common goal very difficult to achieve. World power, the most powerful person. World power is a very controversial subject and there have been a lot of debates over this issue. A nation or other political entity having the power to influence the course of world events is considered to be a world power. Who do we think is the most powerful person in the world? Is it the President of the United States? Or could it be the Pope? The President is often considered the most powerful man in the world, because he is the leader of the most powerful nation in the world. However, there are many other political leaders who have a lot more power in terms of their ability to say something. The President has Congress and the Supreme Court to answer to, which limits his power. Actually, this year's Forbes list of the world's most powerful people is out with a twist that may be a surprise to some and a confirmation of reality to others, ranking Chinese President Hu Jintao at number 1, above U.S. President Barack Obama. Although the Pope has over 1 billion Catholic followers, he is no longer the most powerful influence in the world. He is actually not even on the top 50 list as one of the most influential people in the world anymore. Not since Pope Innocent III was a powerful Pope. He held this position for 18 years at a time of weak European monarchies. There has therefore been a conspiracy theory about the New World Order which has been passed down for centuries. It is said that some believe that there are those who thought have made a deal with the devil to gain wealth and power and to move humanity into accepting to utopian world government. World power, the appearance of America. Since the turn of the 20th century the United States has emerged as a world power. The United States has made a major strategic commitments in the Far East. It has thus acquired territory never intended for statehood, and committed itself to police actions and interventions in the Caribbean and Central America. We have always been the go-to guy when countries are in trouble. The United States is thought to be a very young country, with its own share of growing pains. From the first time the Pilgrims landed in the early 1620s and had to deal with all the hardships, which were Indians, lack of resources, and they were in a country that they were unfamiliar with. Then we had to fight for our independence from England early in the 1770s, which at that time considered what a world power and a force to be reckoned with. In the early 1860s America, which divided into a civil war between the Union and the Confederates, the southern states were trying to secede from the Union. If in fact the Union was not able to stay together, the United States probably would not be considered one of the great superpowers today. The United States has been in several wars on the other side of the globe and since World War II, where we used our industrial might to influence the war, and after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki the Japanese then said that they had woken a sleeping giant. Since then the United States has been regarded as a superpower. The world powers at that time were England, Germany and France. But after World War II the United States has been the world's policeman considered. We realize that we are exhausting our natural resources at alarming rate too. Whatever your motivation for considering using to alternative renewable energy source, the environmental and financial benefits of a magnetic generator has never been easier or more affordable.